Alright guys, a quick plug for the channel before we get into the actual work here. I do have a promo code on the screen in front of you, MPUPPY10. That'll get you 10% off these Demon HD axles, so use that if you're buying Demon axles. Also, like and subscribe if you find this video helpful and you like stuff like this. Check out the Patreon page. I'm actually making this video because someone on the Patreon page specifically asked for a complete install from start to finish to do one of these axles. So if you want custom stuff like that, you want, a more personal interaction or whatever, check out the Patreon page. I respond to stuff on there almost immediately. Alright guys, so the Demon heavy duties are finally back in stock for the Foreman or Rubicon. So of course I got a set for the front of my Foreman 500. One of my axles is clicking, and rather than get strained on a ride, I'm just going to beef it up. So you see these axles are slightly different lengths, right? See how long the shaft is here versus this one? The short one on almost every Honda goes on the left side. Your front differential is offset to the left. So there's your left axle, there's your right axle. Of course, these are double plunging, which means that they've got crazy travel. Demon probably could get away with having one size for both because they're double plunging, but I like that they actually have two unique part numbers, because when you're running lift kits and stuff, having the perfect shaft length helps all the angles. So yeah, I'm gonna throw these in there. I'll give you a quick how-to video. I've done these before. A lot of people don't know this, but Demon has upgraded their HD axles. So these axles are running the same cages as the Demon Extreme axle. So there's a lot of very high quality alloy shit here. I don't know how they're making this much quality stuff at the price. Super good OEM style, really good boots. I've never torn these boots, and the internals are very strong. So this is definitely the axle I recommend if you're running, any kind of oversized tire. And they're cheaper than an OEM replacement, so you really can't go wrong. And they're double plunging, so if you're running a big lift, this is the way to go. I do not recommend running the bracket lifts without putting an axle upgrade on a Honda Foreman or Rubicon or Rancher. The shaft there on this side is about 5/8 of an inch longer. So your long shaft, again, goes on the right side. You can look at the differential and see that the differential sits closer to the left than the right, and that's because the drive shaft doesn't have any U-joints and everything has to be in line. So make sure you don't mix up your axles. I see people do that all the time. All right, so I changed a lot of these axles for people, and I can install them in about 10 minutes. The way I do it is a little different, but I think it's the safest and the quickest. So I unbolt the two lower control arm bolts and nuts here and here, and then I swing the lower control arm out of the way, undo the shock mount, push the shock behind the arm like you see like that, and then I hold it up with a ratchet strap so the arm's out of the way. That gives you plenty of room to snatch the axle out, put the new one in, and then you just stick it into the knuckle, put it back together. The reason I do it this way is because you don't have to mess with ball joints. Messing with ball joints can result in tearing the boot, messing up the threads. It's a little more high risk. Nothing can go wrong here because you're just taking out two bolts and nuts. Be careful when you do this though. As soon as you pull the axle shaft out, the brake rotor is going to want to fall off, which is not a big deal as long as you know to grab it. But the way I do it, I don't even have to mess with unbolting the caliper. Not comfortable doing the axle the way I just showed you because you don't do a ton of these. That's fine. I mean, you can also just remove the upper control arm too and bust the tie rod off. And if you take off these two bolts and nuts up here, you get all the suspension out of your way, and that way you can get the axle in and out without fighting it. If you don't do a lot of these, that's how I kind of recommend doing it so you don't mess something up. Again, if you just pull these two bolts and nuts, the shock mount, and take off your tie rod, take off your caliper, you can get all the suspension out of your way. I just do them so much, it doesn't make sense for me to fight with them like that. I'm comfortable just kind of sneaking the axle out with just the bottom control arm off. Also, it's kind of a known thing with a lot of aftermarket axles. They come with this really fat washer, and if you put this washer on here, you can't get the cotter pin in. So most people just leave the washer out. It works fine. Ideally, you could replace this with a thinner washer, but you can't use your factory nut because the threads and the nut in the axle are different from aftermarket to Honda. So that's how I do it. It works fine. It's just, one of those aftermarket things. So right here, just pull off your cotter pin, the pair of diagonal cutters. Don't call them dikes, someone will get offended. 30mm nut. You don't reuse this factory nut. These threads are different than the Demon threads. Then I switch over to a 14mm socket. Unbolt the lower shock mount. Grab an extension with a wobble. Unbolt the lower control arm. So you're taking out 3 14mm bolts and nuts basically. This is how I like to do it. It's a lot quicker than getting in here with a wrench and fighting it. Alright, we got those nuts off. Pull out these bolts. Now our lower control arm is free. So take the shock, push it right there. That'll let us get the lower control arm out of the way. On this side, we can actually pick the shock up. On the other side, if you have a snorkel, to hit the snorkel. So pick the shock up like that, and then you kind of push your axle out of the hub. This is kind of a faff if you haven't done it a few times. All right. Now we got the axle out of the hub. At this point, I like to take a ratchet strap and hold everything out of my way. Okay, so that's all out of the way. Now you can grab the axle, put your foot on the frame. There you go. That axle feels like that's the one that's about to blow, by the way. Yeah, and the boot's starting to split. So these axles are junk. I don't know why people run them. They came on this machine. So I've been wanting to replace them with Demons, but the Demons were out of stock. So now that they're in stock, definitely gonna do the upgrade. So go in here with a rag, clean out your seal. This is a pretty new seal. I just rebuilt this differential, so not gonna change the seal. I like to put a little bit of grease on this end. Don't go crazy with it. It just helps the seal, and it helps the helps that snap ring stay in place. So you want to keep that snap ring centered, so it's easier to put the axle in, and that grease kind of helps with that too. All right, now we're gonna stab it into the diff. It's gonna push and rock. All right, axle's in the differential. Take off your nut. Discard this washer because it's not gonna fit anyway. Give the axle a tug, make sure it's not gonna pop back out. Now we're gonna stab the axle into the knuckle. All right, we got that in the knuckle. At this point, you wanna put your rotor back on. So stick that in between the brake pads, and then you can push the axle into the rotor slash hub assembly, like so. We got our new nut here from Demon. And torque that sucker down. Just tighten it until you can get the cotter pin in, basically. A little more. These suckers do need to be pretty tight, I'm not gonna lie. Demon does supply new cotter pins, but I just save those because if the old ones are in good shape, I'll just put them back in. This cotter pin's actually a little small, but whatever. You get it good and tight, that's all you need. All right, now we don't need the ratchet strap anymore. Get that out of our way. And put our upper shock mount bolt back in. Kind of hold everything in the right spot. Now you can take your lower control arm, swing it back up here. Actually, don't put this bolt back in yet, I lied. That was wrong. Leave it out so then it makes it easier to get your lower control arm up on top of the skid plate. Yeah, get that in place, then put your upper shock mount in. Alrighty, that is the way. Put our two, frame's a little rusty there. There we go. Line that up, stick in your 14mm bolts. All right, so now it's back together. We just got to tighten down some 3 14mm nuts. Yeah, so doing it this way is a little tricky, but it's definitely the fastest way to do it. So like I said again, if you're not comfortable with how I just showed you, go ahead and take off the upper control arm and all the other stuff. It doesn't take that long to pull off. I just like to do it as fast as possible because I change probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 axles a week on my machines and others. So I found a way to do it with the fewest steps. Someone's gonna say, you put the impact on the wrong side of the bolt. I don't care. Yeah, so it's done. That's how you do it. Just gotta throw the wheel back on, but as you can see, I didn't have to mess with the brakes. I didn't have to unbolt the caliper or bust any ball joints. And yeah, we got our new axle in there and it looks pretty mean. All right, so at this point, all that's left to do is throw on the tires. I'm gonna put the 32-inch Aztecs on here for tomorrow's ride. So I gotta go get those, but changing these axles is really freaking easy. They hardly ever stick unless you have a lot of water in your diff. If you do have a lot of water in your differential, try both axles. If you can get one of them out, you can put an extension through there to knock the other one out. These differentials don't have a cross pin, so if you do have a stuck axle, try that, but generally the fronts are really easy. The rear Rubicon axles stick pretty bad.